Hello and welcome to this episode of Page One Extra, where we get a returning guest on the podcast and ask them what they've been up to since they've last been on the podcast, and also find out 5 books that have influenced their writing. If this is your first time tuning in, Page One Extra is sort of the sister podcast to Page One, the writers podcast, where we interview writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And Richard was a previous guest on the podcast, we invited him back in because he's got not one but 2. Oh. Well, he's got one new book out and he's got another one coming out fairly soon as well. We chat to him about that. Yeah, it's a fun chat. And Richard Swan, as you say, give him his full title. He was back in he was back in November 22. So it's been 3 years or so almost since we chatted to him last. And when we chatted to him previously on the main show, he just had The Justice of Kings was his first of his fantasy trilogy.
Empire
just
of
come
the Wolf
out.
trilogy.
Empire of the Wolf trilogy, and he's now all 3 of those books has come out. The Turn of Faith, Children of the Empire are the 3 books there, and his latest novel, Grave Empire, which is the first in his new trilogy, has just come out. Steel Gods is out next year, and as Margaret says, he also has The Infinite State, a sci-fi novel coming out next year as well, which is he's just had the novella of the Scour, which is set in the Empire of the Universe, Empire of the Wolf universe as well. And we sort of chat to him about, how it's good to have, because I think Grave Empire as well is set in the same world, but hundreds of years later. So all of these things can feed back into, jumping on points.
Yeah, exactly. Jump on points and then feed them back to your backlist, essentially. Which is not smart. A bad idea. It's a really fun chat we have with Richard. And then, we talk about the 5 books that have influenced him. And interestingly, for someone that has had, 4.5, if we're calling the novella a half, fantasy books out, no fantasy books on that.
Yeah, no, it's an interest. It's quite an eclectic. Not the kind of classic stuff that I would imagine, like a few big fantasy novels that were big in them. It's more, we won't spoil in them, but yes, it's a very interesting list for sure.
Yeah, it is. So we'll get straight into it now, and we'll be back at the end of the episode with a bit more chat.
For now, on with the podcast.
Well, thanks very much for coming back onto the podcast as one of our few returning guests at this point.
Yes. One of the very best are allowed back on the podcast.
Yes, exactly. And then we couldn't get them, so we had to contact you.
They were all busy.
But we were just saying before we started recording, we last chatted, I think, back in November 2022 when Justice of Kings had come out. Now, obviously, since then, you have become a superstar author. The full Empire of the Wolf trilogy is done.
Dusted, yeah.
Grave Empire's been out, and you've got other books coming out now. But I mean, in that, do you want to sum up that past 3 years or so since we last spoke?
Yeah. It's sort of followed a bit of a pattern of just the 1 book a year for a little while, and then I was writing full time because it was one of the kind of conditions I said to my wife before we moved to Australia. I said, if we move to Australia, I want to write full time, and so I did. And I was sort of writing all these sort of different books, and when it turns out when you start writing, and it's all you're doing, you actually become tremendously productive. And so I was sort of writing like 3 or 4 novels a year. And I thought, my agent and publisher were all like, well, we're only going to do 1 a year. And I was like, this is not going to work for me. I've got books just stacking up now. So, and also from a sort of career diversification perspective, I don't think you necessarily want to be, if you can, obviously, not be yoked to one given publisher, because, we all know the stories, and I think you're sort of 1 long weekend away from career annihilation. So I was like, I've got to kind of add a few legs to this career stool, and so I was writing some science fiction as well, which is my first and greatest passion. And I had written this book, which would come to be called The Infinite State, And before that, I'd written a post-apocalyptic novel, a short one, which is set in the UK, which I still really like. And a friend of mine read it and he loved it. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to show this to my editor at Tor." And he did. And we sort of went around the houses a little bit on that one. And he wasn't quite convinced about it. And we said, "Oh, actually, we're going out abroad with this this science fiction novel, The Infinite State, in February. Do you want to take a look at that before we do that?" And so Robert at Tor did, and he much preferred that one. And so they sort of followed a bit of back and forth about, what's your sales sort of track record and stuff, because you're a bit of an unknown quantity to us in the States at Tor. Anyway, they ended up buying it, and then Gallant bought it in the UK. And so that's coming out next summer, which I'm very, very excited about. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But so that's happened. And then I've got Grave Empire, which obviously came out this year, and the sequel to that, Steel Gods, which is out next year as well. And then I did Adrian in Grimdark magazine, who I know quite well, said, "I'm doing this new novella line. I want to kind of break into the novella market and sort of move on from just short fiction. Do you want to do a tie-in to Empire of the Wolf?" So I said yes, and I couldn't write quite quickly now, so that was only about 6 weeks, 2 months worth of work. So I said yes, absolutely, and sort of did that. That's called the Scour, and that's just come out. Nice. And then I also, I've been like a lifelong kind of like Warhammer fan, so like sort of collector and painter. Mm-hmm. And I met Justin Woolley at a con a couple of years ago here in Australia, and he wrote a novel for them. And I said, "Oh, I've always wanted to do that." So he put me in touch with his editor, and I did a few short stories for them. And then I am now doing I've got a novel for them coming out next year. So next year I've actually got three books out. And I'm like, yeah, this is great. Like I'm finally at a sort of stage now where I feel like my career is on a sort of even ground now, probably. Like I can bank
you can relax
on
a little bit. You can
exactly, the advance payments. Empire of the Wolf earned out last year, so I'm getting royalties on that. I'm getting multiple advance streams, and it's all kind of like cascading nicely, sort of financially. So I'm sort of safe-ish. I said to someone, I think it was Sonia Dean on a Discord, I said, every new sort of book deal, there's no point at which you ever feel like, yes, finally I can rest. Every new book deal just feels like a stay of execution. Like I've just prevented, I've staved off the gallows for another two or 3 years, and you just need that one. I think we all hope for that one mega kind of viral success. Like I just pay off all of my mortgage and just have a war chest to last me, keep me in victuals for the next sort of 40 years. It's a mega kind of book level, movie level money. But otherwise,
or you just have so much stuff out there that the royalties are just
that's it. And that's the other, and the conventional wisdom seems to be, you make your money from the backlist, and so. And that's another reason why I was like, I can't just keep having one book out a year. This is like basically minimum wage. I need to sort of triple this income. And that was like a 6-figure advance, right, for Empire of the Wolf. But I need to basically double or even triple this income. I don't need to, I want to. And so we're fine. And so I need this money. I'm like,
sorry, we're not
I must have my gold tower.
Yes.
Wagyu beef is a good order itself. And so sort of, and it's only by, as I say, it's multiple kind of ongoing concurrent series, and then it's all starting to stack nicely. But the dream is in a few years, you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 published books behind you. And one of the great things about doing books set in the same universe is, I've seen with Grave Empire, which is set 200 years after Empire of the Wolf, is that I'll see a review and it'll say, I love this book. I'm going to go back to read Empire of the Wolf now. And so there's every new book in that, or the Scour, which is just a novella, but it's totally standalone. So every one of these is just driving people back to
exactly.
Justice of Kings, which is earned out. So that's all just royalty kind of upside now. So it's in the last 3 years it's gone well, but I would say it's not been until the beginning of last year that I think when these things started to kind of happen and I felt a bit of movement that I thought, like I can sustain this as my primary or sole, source of income now for probably the next 5 or 6 years at least. But yeah, I didn't feel that comfortable with it until last year. Yeah.
How do publishers? Because often we hear, like Tariq, I know you, for example, have just got a book out with Thomas and Mercer, but Midnight King was out with Viper and stuff like that. So, I sometimes hear that it can be quite difficult getting publishers to agree to allow these different books to come out in the same year and things like that.
We did have to, contractually we had to offer, we offered Infinite State. Contractually, but also I think as a matter of professional courtesy, I think we offered Orbit everything first.
Yes, sure.
They were happy enough with the annual cycle of fantasy. I don't think they were in the market to start publishing multiple books from me. I think the sort of the conventional thinking is you can start to interfere with your own marketing cycles. But we were very sanguine about it because there was talk with them because I had the Warhammer IP book out, which is I guess technically a sci-fi, but that feels very self-contained in its own sort of sphere. So I wasn't worried about that. My agent was a little bit more nervous about it, but they didn't care at all. They were like, yeah, that's fine. And I said, I might actually be having these sort of special editions done of this other sci-fi, and they were like, yeah, whatever, let's go wherever. Like, cool, okay.
Would you do?
Yeah, what? Yeah, sure, no, that'll be fine. Yeah, mate. So no, it was fine, but we did offer all, and same with the Scour. We said, look, we're doing this novella. Novellas can, they're obviously a little bit of a different animal. For shorter. And I think unless you are kind of like I say mega hit, but even then, Fonda Lee, I think her novellas went to sub press for the Greenbone stuff. So I don't, if you have a publisher that's just generally not that interested in the shorter form, I don't think they care, to be honest. And I think if anything, it just helps them market the original.
Yeah. Well, like you say, presumably it helps them, as you say, it feeds people back to the original.
Exactly.
Everything always, it's everything that you do that you sell well, your profile rises. It does help them in a way.
Right.
There's no downside in that sense. And I think we chatted with Stephen Graham Jones years ago now.
Yeah, right.
And he was saying that he was in a kind of similar situation for a while. He was writing, because he writes super fast. He writes books in like a weekend or something. It's like ridiculous. And he had like 3-4 books a year written, and and they were going out, and they weren't selling that great. And he changed publishers or editor or agent or something, and they said to him, "You're putting out too much stuff. It's too fast."
Yes.
And they're all very samey stuff. I think they're all kind of very kind of crime horror-y kind of stuff.
Yeah. You definitely can do too much.
Yeah. I think what you've done is quite interesting because you've kind of got like a fantasy stuff, you've got your sci-fi stuff, you've got your IP stuff. It feels different enough that I think you can easily have that kind of 3 releases in a year.
Exactly,
not overlap or cannibalize yourself almost.
I think, and that's exactly right. And it's only worked because they're different genres. And I think if I had done like another fantasy novel, all they would have said, no. you may not. But as I said earlier, like my fantasy sci-fi was always my primary, or I considered it to be my kind of primary genre.
Well, you wpubbed 3 books that you self-pubbed.
That's right. That's ticking along in the background. Yeah. A few hundred quid a month in my pocket.
Nice. Well, you've mentioned there that obviously the Scour is just out. Empire of the Wolf trilogy was massive. I really enjoyed it. But do you want to tell us about the Scour?
Yeah, Scour is it was basically like, as I said, Adrian sort of got in touch and said, "Do you want to do a novella?" And I felt like that setting, and it was a prequel, so it's sort of set. That wasn't his idea; it was mine. But it was sort of set 15 years before the Justice of Kings, and I thought it was a setting and a character that was absolutely ripe for exactly that sort of serialized case format where you have traveling investigator, judge, executioner, whatever. And you could just do a sort of almost like an Agatha Christie type self-contained mystery, and you wouldn't really need to know anything about any of it. You could just come in at the novella. So I thought, yes, that would be a lot of fun. And it was interesting because I haven't done like a kind of mystery since the Justice of Kings. Well, Tyranny of Faith was a sort of mystery as well, but the scope kind of broadened, and then Trials of Empire just became like an insane kind of gothic murder fest. but the first, and so I was like, oh yeah, how do you sort of do this again? And I remember that some of the way I approached it was to kind of write the gold, what I call the gold thread, which is like what actually happened. And then Tariq, obviously you're a crime writer, so I don't know if this is how you approach it, but you write the golden thread first. He just makes it up. Yeah, that's a cool twist. Yeah. Let's roll with it. And then work backwards. So like, and then you can work out where you, because I love plotting books and stuff. So I was kind of quite an intensive plotter, but it was fun to, because obviously Justice of the Kings in that series was all from Helena's perspective, the character Helena. Whereas this wouldn't feature her. This would just be a Von Volt and Bressinger kind of duo. So it was fun to be back in the world. And because all the there was no, it was very frictionless in writing it, because all of the creative labor had been done. Like I wasn't building the world or the characters or anything. I just kind of slipped back into that aspect of it. It was like mega easy. So it was fun. It was a very kind of fun experience. And Adrian did a really good job. He's kind of like, I've got one here actually. He did this kind of like special this is the special edition Arc, which is kind of like there's only 100 of these, and it's got this kind of like foil kind of cover. And then he did Broken Binding did like a special edition and stuff, which is nice. So it's all going great guns, but it was a very different kind of commercial experience as well, because obviously we were kind of looking. Adrian's a friend as well as but we were very blunt with each other, and I said to him like, look, I'm not doing anything that doesn't involve royalties. So I ended up not taking an advance at all. I was like, I'm more about the back end. And so we were, we sort of structured it around that, where he thought, okay, well, I'll structure this in a way that I'm going to get you the X amount of money, and then we'll kind of do that. And with the Broken Binding, that was able to ameliorate a lot of his kind of financial. So it was interesting to approach it from that side of things. And I didn't use my agent for it. It was all just kind of like, didn't feel like we needed that level of formality. So we kind of did it that way, but it was, and watching him kind of wrestle with all the different, Grimdark magazine he's been publishing for years now, but moving into kind of more paper-based distribution. He did a novella last year or the year before with Anna Smith Spark and Michael Fletcher, which I think did pretty well, and that kind of provided him with the blueprint of how he was going to approach it going forwards. And then off the back of that, he's sort of like looking to sort of grow and expand into a sort of, I guess, like a Tor.com type. Yeah. They've got the novella market totally stitched up, haven't they? So, but it's been great.
Nice. And you've got the Infinite Slate coming out next year, which is your first Infinite State. Sorry, I've written down Slate.
No.
Infinite State's a much better title. I remember writing. I was like,
did you think I did like a shit book?
Slate. That's so
stupid.
Why is that like
title?
A roof slate?
Oh,
how does this work? I'm intrigued. I'm actually So Infinite State.
The Infinite State.
Which is your
what in your head? What was the sort of the slate?
I was thinking like a roof slate, like just like one slate,
or is it
numbers,
like the Mass Effect sort of, or the Halo wheel, Infinite?
Oh, the wheel, like a
so like all wrong.
Rimworld,
good
thing.
Larry Niven.
I'm trying to lean into the sci-fi.
I'm
going to copyright all these ideas now. I'm afraid
it's about a galactic roofer.
So it's like a Douglas Adams type stuff.
That's right. It is actually, Infinite State. The Infinite State,
Infinite State is out next year.
That's out next year.
You said your first sci-fi book in our book. So don't tell us about what that book's about.
It is about a little while ago. I was playing. Have you ever heard of a game called Stellaris?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep.
Stellaris. I put in I think this is the closest I ever came to the divorce. I put it.
You fell in love with Stellaris.
You need to explain what Stellaris is for those that don't know what Stellaris is.
I will.
Yeah.
Stellaris is a computer game in which you build a space civilization from scratch, basically, and you can colonize different planets, and you kind of have the different buildings and like traits. So you can have like a martial empire or whatever, peace based. It's really good, very very immersive. And a few years ago, we were first moved to Australia. I was unemployed. I'd gone from being like a litigator in sort of City of London to just doing nothing, basically. And my wife was kind of getting up to the office every day. And I was at home and I didn't even have a book deal. and I was kind of sort of tootling on my laptop in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I had a mate who lives in Vancouver, and I was so far ahead time wise. I think it was like my afternoon was his evening, so he would knock off work, and together we would play Stellaris for like 4 hours. I did this like weeks, and the optics of it were dreadful. Like looking back on it now, my wife was just like, just sat in the corner, just playing this fucking computer game. Anyway, it went on for much too long.
It's more than just a game to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just need 10 more minutes.
Have you played Crusader Kings? That's this.
I haven't. I tried to get into other ones, not to derail the conversation too much, but did try a few others. But Stellaris just felt like that you had so much more agency over the direction that the anyway. But I thought, I was really inspired by this idea of building a country or a nation or a planet from scratch. And so I thought, that'd be cool. At basis of a book, like, what if you were so minted you could basically buy a world, and just you could create your own society, whatever you like. And that was sort of the kernel of the idea. Anyway, I started writing it a few years ago, and I'm more kind of story added into the mix. This idea of maybe it's not just about building a society, but maybe it's about fleeing a really repressive totalitarian regime to create like a democracy. Like if you've come from like basically a massive fascist sort of state, and you want to create a sort of democratic state, and it would, but like from the ground up, so that the nuts and bolts of it all, you were literally creating and building all of the different institutions and stuff, a judiciary, a police force, all the civic organs of government, and all the kind of the chicanery that sort of goes along with it. And at the same time, this horrible, bleak, brutal kind of 1984 style totalitarian state, which is really dark. And I was having a conversation with a friend today, and he said, I'm looking forward to reading Infinite State. And I said, I didn't actually think you'll like it. I think because it's really horrible in parts. And he said, why do you write such horrible books? And I said, I don't know, because I have such a wonderful, pleasant life. I don't know where it sort of comes from. But I felt like it was this, if you can make it really bleak, the sort of the stakes justify the payoff. Anyway, it's my love letter to the genre. But it's not that sci-fi either. It doesn't have a huge amount of sort of tech in it. And I wanted to portray the Decurion Empire, which is kind of the totalitarian state, as this kind of like, there's a book that years old. It's about the fall of the Soviet Union, and it's called Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More. And it's basically about the sort of concurrent reality of the Soviet Union, where you have this kind of, everyone's telling you, with the Soviet Union, it's going to last forever. It's amazing. We're great. We're the best at everything. And at the same time, knowing everything is shit and it's going to fail. And you're sort of like, your eyes and ears are telling you one thing, and your lived reality is sort of telling you another. And how these two states can coexist. And then the state fell. And it's this idea that it's a really interesting book. And it's this idea of how sort of fascist states, and you look at like Nazi Germany or whatever, appear superficially very alluring, and like, everything is ordered and neat, and you've looked at impressive architecture and stuff. And actually, as you sort of scratch the surface, it's all just smoke and mirrors, and they're incredibly dysfunctional. And there's just, and in hindsight, you can see there's no way they could have ever survived and sustained themselves. And so with Infinite State, I was kind of like working off this. They're all so nasty and horrible, but everything's just crumbling. Like they can't even get power to the capital city half the time, because everyone's siphoning off money from the power companies or whatever. So it was a really fun way of examining, and everybody was like, oh, well, you're just doing Trump or whatever. I'm not, like, I'm really not, like, it's more this kind of like, I read a tremendous amount of sort of World War II fiction, and it's all about fan fiction then. A big fan fiction, a lot of World War II fan fiction. No, it's a real war. But no, a lot of non-fiction.
Yeah.
And it was more about that sort of channeling all of that sort of knowledge into kind of this fictional empire. So I think the early feedback has been really positive, and I think it's this sort of very compelling. It's got a bit of detective noir in there. It's got a bit of, high stakes kind of horrible, the sort of Death of Stalin type, almost comical. That's So anyway, it's not also that sort of. I think Tor are giving it a big push. It looks like they're sort of going to make it.
I've seen the arcs, and they look great and stuff. But with a story like that is telling such a big story on a macro scale, how do you decide where to come in at that on from a character point of view?
It's a really interesting question. I think I did it when I write fiction. I tend to actually focus on the normally one of the questions I've been asked before is like, why, and same with the Empire of the Wolf, why did you choose to write like a guy who's basically at the top, in and amongst the organs of state, like basically a member of the government, rather than a kind of rebel who's normally
level.
Exactly. And the answer is I don't know. I think I just wanted to write. I mean, Catherine Fuller, who's the kind of main character, and her husband dies in the first chapter, right? And the strong suggestion is he's bumped off because he's become politically inexpedient, and so she inherits like hundreds of billions of dollars, right? And the whole conceit of the novel is they have this kind of private buyer's market, which international obligations oblige them to be a member of. And so she buys the rights to settle a virgin world. And so all the kind of party members are like trying to find ways to kind of stop it. And so I needed her to be who she is for the story to work, number one. So she had to be that. And then it was like, I wanted to have like, as I say, I'm just sort of cherry picking the things I like. I think we as writers kind of think, well, what do I like? What do I find interesting? What do I like to write about? A little while ago, I watched the movie A Most Wanted Man. Do you remember that one? It's based on like Le Carré novel. And I thought Philip Seymour Hoffman's sort of very world-weary German police detective was like a great character. I've been wanting to do a character around that for ages. So I kind of worked in an investigation, kind of neo-noir kind of plot in there as well. And then and this is a 3 for 6, there's, you remember the old game Wipeout? On the PS1,
the racing one,
AG, anti-gravity racing one. Yeah. I love that game, and I thought I really want to write that. So I had like a guy. I said, right, how can I contrive to have space Formula One in the book? And so I did, and the way I can't sort of. This guy, he's Pater Eternus is a kind of cult of person. Pater Eternus is the name of the party. The political party, and they have this. They can't lose. They have to be the best at everything because they're Pater Eternus. They're a fascist state, so they always have to win. Yeah. And he is a foreigner, but he's the best hypersled pilot in the galaxy. And so they're like, well, we're going to have him because we need to win. Our team needs to win all the races. So they kind of get him in. But what they don't know is he has a secret, which kind of what they would call he's unproductive. And I won't spoil what that means, but. They've recruited this guy and he's like their flagship kind of racer, but he's also secretly, just by virtue of him being him, is completely antithetical to what they believe in. So he could basically undo the whole. So there's a lot of maneuvering, and that's kind of the darkness in the story. So it was fine. And so yes, I kind of wanted to include characters who could do interesting things that I wanted to happen within the book, and then I kind of retconned and made it retroactive. So I was like, right, well, I don't do Space Formula One, so how can I work that into the plot? But it does look, I promise you, it's seamless. It sounds totally whack.
I mean, I'll be honest, I can't shake the image of your wife coming home and you're in your pants playing Stellaris for day 75. And she's like, "What the fuck?" And you're like, "I know it's research. It's research, honey. It's for a book."
Trust
and
me.
I have to write something now that's around this. Yeah.
I did. You know what? I said, "There's nothing in the world. If you're a genre writer, you write sci-fi or fantasy. Get your wife or whoever, and tell them in detail about the thing that you're writing. And there is nothing that makes you sound more insane. And you're just sort of talking, and you're like." This is when you watch like an American high school and there's like a guy getting bullied, and it's like I sound like a nerd. Like it's just my wife is probably just hearing like, just there's a goblin or an orc turned up. Yeah, like, and she just is not in this world at all, and so it's just like I'm hearing myself tell her about it. And I'm like, this sounds like insanity. Like this, she's just probably like, like she's like, as long as the money keeps rolling in, you just do you.
Yeah,
I'm sort of like hunched over writing.
Just closes the door, nodding.
Wacky. Yeah.
It sounds though it does sound though that it has some elements of or some similarities to Andor as well. Some of the themes in that
does
as well,
coincidentally,
a huge thing recently, which I thought
was
brilliant.
And you'll find that you'll write something and then you'll realize that it looks like you've just pilfered other stuff. I remember coming up with Grave Empire, the storyline for Grave Empire, and for ages I had the idea of, and it's not unique to me, obviously, about a million people have this, but a sort of a race of aliens or monsters or whatever that eat consciousness, like mind vampires, whatever. And I so that's a great idea. I could have worked it into a book. And then I read Pidido Street Station, and that's basically that whole book. And I was like, fuck, and I feel like, like there's just so everyone somewhere else will have done it.
There's only what did they say? There's only 9 stories or something.
I believe it.
Yes,
probably about 3 actually, and I've written one of them. And so yes, there will always, you'll say something and be like, oh yeah, just like blah, and you'll say, actually, I've never even heard of that, or I've never even
look.
Read
It didn't stop Ants, man. It didn't stop Ants. It didn't stop Deep Impact.
Bugs Life.
It's got to go for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe you. So it will. Someone will say, "Oh, it's just Star Wars," and it's like it's not.
Yeah,
it's not Star. Like
just a lazy comparison, isn't it?
Yeah, right. You know what I mean.
Level. Yeah.
No, but in some ways that might help with the.
It might.
Oh, yes, marketing.
Well.
You're right, because actually, it's the flip side is that you also want it to be comparable to stuff.
That's
you
true.
Want to
Actually,
it's like
it's
Star
exactly
Wars,
like Star Wars. Yeah, it's like Star Wars, but for grown-ups. I say that, but I love Star Wars.
Well, last question before we jump into your 5 books, which is you've published 7 books now. Obviously, written more.
Yes.
But I wonder what's your view on how things have changed, kind of market-wise, in that time? Have you seen? Is it a harder genre to get into now? Is it an easier genre? Is there stagnation? What's your thoughts on all that kind of stuff?
I feel like, and nobody's an expert in this, even the people who are experts in it. And I feel, but I'll give you what I reckon. I reckon that the type of fantasy that I write, which is a sort of, it's not quite classic epic fantasy, because that would be more kind of swords and sorcery, but it's kind of like, it's still your kind of long-ish, fantastical, gritty-ish, dark-ish kind of fantasy, has slightly fallen out of fashion in the last kind of 3 or 4 years. And a lot of, it seems to me at least, a lot of big publishers have pivoted extremely hard to the currently easy money of romantasy and kind of romance-heavy themes. And, you don't, I mean, even at Orbit, which is obviously where I do all my fantasy, you look at the acquisitions for the last 2 years, and 9 out of 10 of them are romantasy. So there's definitely a huge wave happening with that. That's having its moment. It's fine. It's not to disparage romantasy in any way. But that's happening, and it's kind of drowning out everything else in the space at the moment. And I think if you were trying to get an epic fantasy published and you were pitching it like a year ago, you'd probably really struggle. Really struggle. If you were pitching it now, you're probably going to come in at the back end of the romantasy. You might be all right. What might be coming, because it's all 18 to 2 months to 2 years in advance. So actually, you might be okay now. But I think if you're doing it a year or 2 ago, you really struggle. And I look at kind of like my Orbit stablemates and kind of my peers, or people who I'd love to consider my peers, at the kind of epic fantasy level. And it does seem to be quite quiet, on that front. And I feel like a lot of the space that was once taken up by that genre is now being filled by indie authors who are thriving in that space because they are doing what trad isn't doing, which is your more classic fantasy, and they're catering to that massive audience that still 100% exists but isn't being served at the moment by the sort of big five. So that's my. And then I think I'll tell you what else I reckon.
You're on a roll now.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one more thing. I do think sci-fi is going to make a bit of a comeback next year, and it's obviously in my interest to say that, but it's going to be big.
Stories about space roofers.
Space roofers is the longest slate you have ever seen. It's so big it can't support its own weight. The influence, I think, yeah, right. I think stories about like dystopias and resistance to fascism and stuff, without getting too political about it all. It might have a bit of a renaissance next year, and so I might be poised to ride that wave. Fingers crossed. Or it might be in like you were an early adopter, but you're a bit too early and you kind of miss the really big stuff. But I think sci-fi. I've heard from sort of friends in the industry that there's a bit more of an appetite for interesting sci-fi. I think your classic space opera, which kind of peaked in the 90s, isn't coming back necessarily anytime soon. But interesting takes on the space opera, or more sort of speculative, non-space opera-y kind of sci-fi is definitely due a bit of a comeback in the coming years. Those are my predictions. But yeah, it's interesting.
We'll revisit them in months or something.
Yes.
When I'm out on the street.
We'll interview you from the
Grimdark fan is now, Swan.
You suck.
So the pretense that we had for getting you on, of course, was to obviously catch up, but also with our returning guests, we like to put them under pressure to come up with the greatest 5 books ever written. No, the 5 books that have influenced them. As I don't know if you've picked 5 that have influenced you generally as an author, or 5 that influenced your latest works.
I've done a mixture of the two. I can give you all sorts. Marco.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm gonna make it slightly more difficult, because I'm gonna make you rank them in reverse order.
Okay. No.
Number 5. Yeah. What is your number 5?
Fuck me.
I don't think I've heard that one.
Yeah, fuck me. It's a great book. It's about. And I'm not going to do that, Marco. That's too difficult. What I am going to do is. I'd say, for me, I think, I was just sort of reflecting on this afternoon, I think the biggest influence has to be Ian Banks. And his works generally, but I was sort of trying to pin it down to 1 or 2 books, because I love his culture stories, but everybody loves those. And so I thought I'd go a bit more niche. So one of them is Walking on Glass. Walking on Glass by Ian Banks, which I read in my early 20s when I was kind of getting back into writing after a couple of years hiatus. And it was I think Ian Banks, I was having this exact conversation this morning. I think Ian Banks is a master of modern Gothic. So Gothic, late 18th, early 19th century Gothic themes, but in a modern kind of context. Yeah. Walking on Glass, I don't know if you've read it, but it was his first book after The Wasp Factory. That wasn't a sci-fi. Okay. And it basically follows kind of 3 storylines, and one of them is a guy who's mad, and it's set in, I guess, what would have been contemporary London, so the 80s, 90s. Yeah. A guy who's insane, who thinks that his thoughts are being monitored. Another character who's a bit less tied into all of it. And then the best part is these 2 war criminals from an intergalactic conflict who have been banished to a planet that's got nothing on it except this one castle. And they have to play games forever. And they have to work out what the rules of the game are, and then they have to play the game. And if they get all of that correct, they have to answer a question, which is what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. And if they get the answer right, they get released. Madness, right? Absolutely off the wall madness. And it's how these 3 storylines ultimately converge. And I always loved Ian Banks' books because he always just was like, he always just loved wacky structures, like, and he would, same with use of weapons. He would have a book that had a storyline running forwards and chronologically, a storyline running backwards chronologically, bookended by 2 contemporary chapters, and then the end of one was the beginning of the other, and like it just blew my mind. And so I loved the way he and it inspired me, I think, to kind of try and play around with, focus on structure and how it can be used as a sort of elevate a manuscript, and that kind of, you have a seemingly very disparate storylines that kind of very satisfyingly kind of intertwine at the very end of the book, and kind of how you do that. It's sort of like a big puzzle. I've always loved that about writing fiction. So I'll say Walking on Glass was definitely one. Nice. And the bridge, definitely. Through the bridge in there too.
What's your next book?
My next book, number 4. Yeah, number 4 in the bullshit ranking. I guess it's Thin Red Line by James Jones. It's one of my favorite books actually ever, and I really enjoyed it because it was the first. Sorry, if you don't know it, it's set in the Pacific theater of the Second World War. It's a sort of it's a fictionalized account of his experiences in the Second World War, and the kind of the island hopping in the Pacific.
Was it made into a film by?
Yes, it was.
Yes, Terrence Malick, exactly.
Yeah, it was.
It was an incredible cast of like every name under the sun. I've never seen
that's right.
The trailer.
And loads of them ended up being cut, apparently. Yeah, it's.
Oh, really?
They filmed like 40 or like 400 hours of footage or something, and then they kind of. I don't know this that well, but
the editor was like, no.
They just and so
lots of the
20 hours long.
Yeah, James Clooney, George Clooney, I think was originally it for loads, and then in the end, the final cut is in it for like 20 seconds or something. Yeah. Anyway, but the book is really good, and what I really liked about the book was it was the first time I read a book that made me feel like really scared of being shot at, which is a weird thing to say, but. You read a load of war fiction, or one does, or violence or whatever, and it all kind of just passes you by. But there was something about his writing where there was a couple of specific scenes, and it was one. I don't know if it happens in the movie, but basically this guy has ordered up this goes as a Japanese machine gun nest, and they've got the whole hill kind of zeroed in with artillery, and so dozens of Americans have already been killed just trying to run up the hill. And the colonel keeps saying to this captain, who's the point of view character at the time, says, "Take that hill." And in the book, he said, what's crazy is his fear of bureaucratic reprimand and of being thought of as a coward was stronger than his fear of being killed. And just reflecting on the absurdity of that, and this really it's only a couple of paragraphs, but I was like, and I still think about it now. Like, it was such a really interesting and a remarkable way of kind of clarifying in your mind. And I think it's Carl Marlantes, or it's one of the Vietnam War writers, does the same thing in one of his books, where he's on the Canadian border, he's about to run away to avoid the draft. And he says, it was astonishing how I was basically willing to go and be killed forever, die permanently, be killed, because I didn't want people to think I was a coward. And just reflecting on the inherent absurdity of that. And James Jones is the same thing. He basically says, almost verbatim, he's like, was it really worth it to die just so people didn't think you were a coward? Really powerful, and I still think about this quite. So, Thin Red Line, that's another one. Love that one.
Excellent. Next one.
Oh man, you're pushing me here. I will have to say, I read a really good. Well, I'll tell you what. Senlin Ascends, which I don't know if you know or have heard of. It's by Josiah Bancroft. It was a book that was originally self-published, and it must have been about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was picked up by Orbit, actually. It was one of those, Mark Lawrence runs the self-published fantasy blog. Yeah. It was the winner of that one year. Maybe it was like 2020, 2021. And he won that, and then Orbit bought it, and they published it, and they published all 4 in the series. And there was something so remarkable about that book. And ever since I was young, I have been trying to capture. There's this aesthetic. It's very popular on the internet now. It's like liminal spaces or back rooms or whatever. Like, do you know this at all? And I, for the longest time, I thought, as we tend to do, because of quite egocentric human beings, I assumed that I was like one of the only people who was interested in this kind of bizarre, unsettling, eerie kind of in-betweenness aesthetic. And for years, I've been trying to kind of work out what it is about that feeling, that inherent eeriness. And for me, it's always been like a lack of a sense of place. And so you'll know, you guys are probably all the same age. You know, when you're sort of growing up in like the 90s and you're playing a game on like the computer or the PS1, and you kind of clip out of the map for whatever the game is, and you're just in the kind of the skybox, or you can see the kind of game, and there's a sense of being in a sort of place that you're not supposed to be, and it's a place that
you had no save point and you were like
just
lost. Like,
exactly.
Hours of playing it,
and you're sort of like, there's no, I feel like this is kind of pre-internet almost, so there's no kind of what sense of like being part of like a wider. You play a game now and everyone's playing it, so you kind of know, there's no sense of broader sort of a new sphere, sort of interconnected minds. It's a very isolating feeling. It's really weird to kind of put my finger on. Anyway, I've been trying to capture that feeling in my writing for many years, trying and failing. But Send in a Sense did it really well. And it's basically the story of a guy who goes to the Tower of Babel, and as a tourist, it's not the Tower of Babel, but it's called that. And he manages to capture this sense of liminality just in a way that I've never seen or read before. And I think it's because I was trying to sort of work out why, because it's a really good book to kind of sort of examine from a craft perspective. And it was like this, he doesn't tell you anything about the wider world. There's nothing. It's just a guy, he goes on a train with his wife, he loses his wife, and there's this sort of like this, and it says in all like the guidebooks and literature, like, you must keep an eye on your relatives or friends, whoever you go with, because if you lose sight of them, there's a really good chance you'll never see them again. And he manages to make that. The guy loses his wife in the first 5 minutes of being around the town, and you just think, oh fuck! Like, this is I don't know how he does it, but this is incredible sense of, you really feel it, like this sort of this panic that he's lost his wife, and then he has to go into the Tower of Babel and go up it, and it's a really, really good book. But there's no sense of broader place. You have no idea what this tower is, like why. It's almost like a dream sequence, like like The Cell, if you ever saw that kind of old movie. So that was a really good book, and I kind of thought he managed to do that thing that I've been trying to do really well.
Like I've not read that book, but it's a bit like, it sounds a bit like to me the start of what I felt at the start of Annihilation, which was by Jeff Vandermeer. It's a sort of sense of detachment, isn't it? You're kind of, you're being told the story, but you're kind of not in. You're not drawn in. You're still drawn in terms of what to read. You're not drawn in the same way that you are with other stories.
There's stuff missing, and you know that's not quite clicking together properly. It feels off in some way.
Yeah, that's right. So another book that did this really well. It was my number 2 now.
Yeah.
What am I on? Number 2. I'm going to talk. This leads me nicely into my number 2. This year I decided because I've been asked to compile lists like this before in various interviews, and whenever I go back through my books, I'm like, they're all men. All the authors I read growing up were men, and not specifically by choice. That's just how I. And so this year I said, I'm going to read more books by women, and I did. And one of them ended up being a transcendental reading experience for me. I think it was one of the best books I've ever read. I really, really enjoyed it. It was called I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. Have you read that one? Have you heard of it?
I saw my Kindle. I've heard nothing but amazing things about it.
It is utterly incredible. And I did not know that I think it's a translation. I didn't actually think it's in English. Okay. I think she was French. And it was also written about 30 years ago. It's not even a new book. But I went
really? I
into
didn't realize
it's not a new book at all. I went into Waterstones in Piccadilly, I think it was, and it was there it was a display of them, and I was like, that sounds cracking. I'll read that. And it is just brilliant. It basically starts, and it's a young girl, growing up in a cave, and it's not a cave; it's like a cage, guarded cage, and you aren't allowed to do a whole bunch of different things. There's no one knows how they got into the cave, and and they're all women. There's about 49 or 50 of them, and she basically spends I don't want to spoil it for you. I was going to talk about it more, but I can't spoil it for you now. Anyway, it's what the thanks for that, mate, Dick. What the book does really, really, really well. It's not a long book, but I can't remember the last time I read a book where I was just like, I have to know.
I love that feeling.
Book.
Yeah.
I have to, and it's a book where you feel that way, and the book's like, I'm not going to give you the answers. Like I know that you are desperate to know, and I'm not going to tell you. And I have never been so full of admiration and so angry at a novel at the same time. And it's like, it's one of those books where you think she could only have ruined it by explaining everything.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that she did.
It's hard, right? It's hard to do that without. I always think of stuff like the obvious examples like Lost or something where you have all the kind of mystery stuff, but you don't give up or you don't wrap up stuff properly. You don't give an answer, and people are left thinking, oh, what the fuck that but you didn't explain anything. Although I think the flip side to that is The Leftovers, which doesn't really explain, I think, if I remember correctly,
why they went,
why they vanished and stuff. But at no point did I feel like I felt like I didn't want to know. I felt like actually I don't need to know.
But it almost didn't matter for the story.
No.
Like it was more. The whole story was about what the focus was on. What happens when you're left behind, rather than why did it happen.
Right.
Maybe that's what. Maybe whereas Lost was very much like what is going on. Let's solve this mystery, and then they just didn't solve it. So maybe that's a bit answer.
I feel like it's. I did a book. I told you a bit earlier. I did that kind of post-apocalyptic book, and the idea was it was sort of set in a post-apocalyptic, weirdly enough, UK, and it was a kind of heart of darkness. A guy gets on a train in London. He basically takes the East Coast main line to kind of
sorry, post-apocalyptic.
Post-apocalyptic, and he had to pay £500 for a single. You fucking what? And anyway,
the horror.
But the UK is also there's just been abandoned, and there's these creatures called screamers, and the book had kind of strong biblical themes, and I didn't explain precisely what had happened in the novel. And then when we sent to the tour, they R&R'd it, and he said, basically explain it. And I did, and I always thought the novel was just so much weaker after that changed ending. So I thought it was better. But anyway, but it's not being published, it doesn't matter. But I, who have never known men, I thought was just a phenomenal book. It just totally blew me away.
Oh, nice. Okay.
In a way that I don't read. I've slowed down in my reading because I'm not commuting anymore. When I was commuting into London, I would read a book a week, basically. It's a book a week. But it was with The Office. But now I don't. I read maybe 10 to 12 books a year, and so I have to be quite selective about what I kind of read. And even then, it's very rare for me to find one I'm super, super engaged in. Unless it's World War II non-fiction, and so or World War II fan fiction, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
What? I never died.
Oh God, don't. Actually, well, that's Fatherland by Robert Harris, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
yeah.
That's a belter. Actually,
that's basically World War II fan fiction. Yeah,
it is. Yeah, it is. Or post-World War II fan fiction. That's really good book.
Yes.
What actually a book I did read? Sorry, I know this isn't part of the interview. A book I did read really well. It was called Aftermath, and it basically covered Germany post 1945 in those kind of like 1 to 5 years in the immediate aftermath, from everything from like clearing up rubble to the occupation zones, and like as you would imagine, like all these disenfranchised people, like doing like lynch mobs, finding ex-Nazis and murdering them, and like it's a fascinating look at the sort of post-war.
But I've never thought about actually the immediate on
No,
the ground,
you
immediate
don't.
aftermath of what
Yeah.
happens.
Exactly.
it
it kind of
end
and then
when they
it's kind of
declare
runs into the
victory.
Cold War.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
No,
you kind of assume in your head, and then everybody was suddenly happy and it was wonderful. But obviously, it's not at all.
No. They're pretty unhappy for a while, actually.
Well, that brings us to the greatest book ever written for you, which is
so it's Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. No, in terms of it's difficult because there's influential books, right, which are books that like influenced the sort of the scope and sort of direction in your whole kind of writing career.
Yep.
And then there are books that you really sort of love and you want to emulate. Like there was a book I read recently called Between Two Fires by Chris Bjorman, which I read. I read it a couple of years ago, and I was blown away by it. And I think one of the things I really admired about it was how uncompromising it was. And I feel like, we can become, in this sort of day and age, I think we can become a little bit hypersensitive to audience sensibilities, and begin to maybe curate a little bit of our own fiction, either consciously or subconsciously. And I think it results in less interesting fiction. What I really liked about Between Two Fires, apart from the fact it was a cracking book, was how uninterested it was in kind of coddling the audience, and it was just such a refreshing novel to read as a result of that. Recently I would have said Between Two Fires was a book that I read that really kind of that I would actively seek to emulate in my own writing. But in terms of like a formative reading experience, I'll still have to say the Night's Dawn trilogy by Peter Hamilton, which I read when I was about 14. And what's really nice about that as well is, I don't know if you've read any of Peter Hamilton's books.
I haven't actually.
No,
basically,
stuff, no.
Premier kind of British sci-fi writer, and he wrote this sort of sequence of real kind of epic doorstopper kind of 1,500-page novels. And I read them when I was about 14, 15, and that was my kind of big introduction to kind of genre fiction at the time, and I was just blown away by it, and there was all sorts going on, and half of it I didn't really understand as well. I was like, I don't know what the fuck, I don't know what the fuck's happening, but I know that I like it, and I think it had that kind of stuff that we take for granted now as adult writers, like the multiple third-person epic sort of POV structure with multiple interconnecting storylines and blah blah blah. But at the time, for me, I was like, wow, this is like the sort of possibilities of what genre fiction can be. It was kind of just totally expansive for me. So they were really important books to me growing up. And then was a really nice capstone to that story was Peter Hamilton Blurb's The Infinite State a few months ago, which is just nuts for me. And I actually managed to reach out to him and I said, you could never know this, but this was like I would never have believed 20 years ago you would be reading my book. That was that was special.
It's kind of bonkers when you think about that kind of main character. It suddenly becomes like this story and becomes looped with this person you've as a little boy, and that's quite a nice.
That was great. So that was really special for me. And he said. His original blurb was quite funny actually, because we were sort of talking about it, and it said it was something like a story so horrific that it'll never happen, but Richard Swan has made it believable. I was like, never actually said it was good in that blurb. He didn't say
the art of it.
The shit sandwich.
A book with pages.
This is a novel by Richard Swan. And then they sort of tweaked it slightly, and then they sent the arcs out. And these guys, I've seen they've put on the front, excellent Peter Hamilton. I was like, they've gone back to him. I'm like, come on, Peter, just give us something, anything, just a word.
Peter, for fuck's sake, man! Third time I'm coming back to this.
Can we just really nail this down? Any indication?
They're just asking him any question that he'll answer with good words that you can then extract for the blurb.
What's the quality of the EPUB we sent you? Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, thanks, Richard. That was great and very informative.
Pleasure. You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Richard. That was a really fun chat. Always a pleasure to chat to him. Interesting book selection. I mean, I have to say the output of his work, for the size of his books, pretty impressive, putting them out at that 1 a year or 2 a year starting next year. So yeah.
3 with the Warhammer book as well.
Oh, the Warhammer stuff as well. Yes, I forgot. That's right. Yeah.
So I mean, it's very.
And he's got time to
as you
play
said,
video
when
games
you when you made that decision to become a full-time writer, sort of, I think you can. You know, I've heard other authors have the same sort of thing, that they sort of suddenly are very, very productive.
Yeah.
And you hit that problem that we discussed there, which is that publishers don't want to publish them that quickly because
That's right.
you sort of eat into your own marketing in a way, which I sort of get.
I know. I kind of.
Not
I mean, I'm always
entirely, but like I can see you wouldn't want like 4 books a year out because people aren't going to be able to keep up.
And I suppose I can see the benefit of saying, well, I'll do something in a slightly different genre, you know. So it's just, I'm not cannibalizing myself, perhaps, but yeah, I think, and I guess it depends what kind of genre you're doing as well, etc. You know, maybe how many people read a lot of big chunky fantasy books every year. Maybe that's you get less of them than reading a fantasy and a sci-fi.
Although,
book
like
or
I
something.
find with those types of books that are in a series, you can get drawn in. You know, like if you're enjoying it, you want to pick up that next one. Immediately,
for sure.
Sort of a thing. So yeah, no.
I've got a question for you, Marco.
Yep.
For a fantasy or sci-fi series, so you say it was a trilogy or more than one book at least, would you tend to jump on at book 1 before book 2 is out, etc., or would you like to wait till the third one's out and you know it's complete and then read them all back to back?
Interesting, yeah, because with TV shows, I like to wait until they're.
That's
all
exactly
out.
what I'm thinking. I'm the same. I rarely watch stuff week by week, and also I'm also wary of TV shows that get cancelled after one season.
Well, I was going to say, so
up.
I would generally like to know the series is going to be finished, which is a danger in particular relation to some fantasy series.
Yes.
So there is that. Having said that, said it many times before in the podcast, my favourite book lies a lot more, and that series is not finished yet. So I jumped on that. I don't think I knew it wasn't finished.
Yeah,
when I picked it up, but you know, I think a good book will, if it's written well, then you can still enjoy it as a standalone almost, even though if it's part of a bigger series. But obviously, you would like to have some assurance that it is going to be be finished.
I've found the opposite sometimes can be a hurdle as well when you start a book, and you're like, Christ, there's like 20 books to get through, and after about 3 or 4, I'm like, I don't think I can't have read something else. I never go back to them. You know, I started reading the Bosch books, and they were great, really fun, enjoyable books, but I got like 5 or 6 in, and I was like, I've still got 25 to go or something. I was like, it's just too much. I'm done.
No, it's true. That is true. That's why I think like a trilogy isn't a bad
nice
length. You know,
nice
because
amount.
It's a decent bigger story, but it's finished.
Yeah.
Albeit,
I agree with that.
I think if you're doing things like Richard's doing, which is like then setting stuff in the same world, but you know, you don't need to have read any of the other stuff. Then that's okay and stuff like that.
Fonda did similar.
If it's a Wheel of Time 15 book, 900 page book, then it starts to get
that's a lot.
Starts to weigh
big commitment.
weigh down on you.
Right.
But you know, it goes to show that playing Stellaris in your pants all the time.
I mean, I'm going to start doing that.
You can be very productive while doing that.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm going to tell
I get shouted at.
my wife. Yeah. Richard, word for Richard Swan. Yes, but he actually did writing as well.
Yeah, you have written for 2 years, Marco.
But yeah, no, thanks very much to Richard for coming on. You can obviously pick up the Scour now. Infinite State, not Slate, is out next year.
It's dropped the ball with that title, I have to say. I was much more interested if it was a roofer.
Space roofer.
Yeah.
We will no doubt have Richard back on at some point in the future as well. So thanks to him for coming on. There will be, these episodes of Page One Extra are intermittent. We like to just get previous guests back on if we can, as and when they've got a new book out or they just want to come on the podcast. So there will be more of these, but in the meantime, of course, you can catch up with your regular Page One, the Writers podcast. We're doing a little run of industry episodes. We're speaking to agents and editors and things like that at the moment, and our drafting notes series as well, where it's just me and Tariq talking about one aspect of writing as well. So there's plenty of stuff to get caught up on there. So
and if you want to get in touch,
go for it.
Do we do the touch? Yes. If you want to get in touch, you can always do so the usual way. Find us on social media. Just search for UK Page One. Find us on YouTube in the comment section below. Just drop us a comment and send us an email, which is podcast@rightgear.co.uk.
Indeed. If there's past guests we've had on that you would like us to get back on, then let us know. And some of them may agree to come back. We'll ask David Mamet back on, Tariq.
I would love to have him back on. Yeah. I finally got some comebacks that I was too slow in the moment to think of, so I'm ready for him this time.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll speak to you soon.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.